Welcome back to another edition of Green is Good. This is the Wharton iGel GE Innovation Water Technology edition of Green is Good, and we're here in beautiful downtown San Francisco, and we're so honored to have with us today Charles Iceland. He's the Aqueduct Director at the World Resources Institute. Charles, welcome to Green is Good.
Thank you so much, John. Pleasure to be here.
It's so nice to have you here. Before we get talking about what we're doing here today and what you're going to be doing in terms of your comments to this important audience, can you share a little bit about your story, Charlie, leading up to becoming the Aqueduct Director, how you even got to that place?
Yeah, it was not a direct line journey, John. I grew up living abroad. My father was a State Department official. We lived in Latin America, in South America, and Mexico. We also had a tour of Southern Europe. We lived in Northern Greece. And I guess what turned me on to environmental issues in the I guess the late 70s, early 80s was the fact that we lived in beautiful places on the water, kind of where we are now. Yeah. Beautiful vistas, but the places where I lived in northern Greece would dump raw sewage into the bay. Wow. And the bay smelled like you would expect it to smell. And you had to drive at least an hour to get to a swimmable beach. Ooh. And I thought, that was a tragedy of mankind. I lived in Mexico City for 9 years as well growing up, and I saw that city transform from a beautiful city surrounded by volcanoes, snow-capped volcanoes, to a city where you just couldn't even see, partway across the city anymore. The smog had gotten so bad. So it was personal for me, my interest in the environment.
And when did you join the World Resources Institute?
I joined the WRI in 2006, about 8 years ago.
And what does WRI do? And for our listeners and our viewers out there, to learn more about WRI, please go to www.wri.org. What does the World Resources Institute actually do? What's its mission?
Yes. Well, the World Resources Institute was created in 1982, about 33 years ago. It was the first think tank of its kind to look at global natural resource issues. And we look at the whole host of natural resource issues, from water to forests and the problem of deforestation, to the issue of climate change and energy. We look at the issue of food and whether we can produce food in a sustainable manner. Wow. For 7 billion today, 9 billion by 2050. So we look at those issues from a nonpartisan perspective. We publish our results. In the past, we published a lot of monographs and papers. Now a lot of it is online, with very data intensive.
It's great.
Changing of the times.
Does it also cover, in terms of natural resources, energy? Does it also cover metals and rare earths and stuff of that nature?
We do look at energy, the issue of using, over-reliance on fossil fuels and the possibility for replacing those with clean energy sources, wind and solar. We promote that actively with groups of private sector organizations. We don't look at mining and minerals too much.
Gotcha. Aqueduct Director, what is that? What is that?
Yes.
What is that? I'm just so fascinated by the title.
Yeah, so about 5, maybe 6 years ago, a colleague of mine who's no longer there, Pete Klopp, and I, and another colleague, Tian Xiao, had the vision of creating an online system where we could measure and map a host of water risks globally. Huh. And we intended the initial users to be corporations and investors who had interests across the world. And this tool would operate as kind of a prioritization tool for them to figure out where they needed to dedicate their staff time and their financial resources to insure themselves against these risks.
Gotcha. So today you're here and you're speaking at this event hosted by Wharton iGel. Yes. And also our great friends at GE. Share a little bit about your thoughts on why now, why here, sitting here in beautiful California, not far from Silicon Valley, and the critical issue surrounding both the problem of the drought here in California and across the nation, and in many ways around the world, but also the innovation and technology and the hope that exists.
Yeah. Well, most people aren't motivated to change the status quo until a crisis comes along. And a crisis has come along. We're at levels of snowpack that are unprecedented, 5 or 10% of snowpack. We're seeing in this conference levels of rainfall that are falling below even the lowest thresholds we used to see. So there's a crisis. And that's the motivator for really good possibilities that exist to drought-proof California, at least the major parts of California, but both its population and its economy. California, as opposed to most other places around the world, has a lot of financial resources. People complain there's not resources. There are resources here when it comes to securing your lifeline, which is what water is. We also have a lot of technologies that can be applied here. We can reuse the water we use in our homes, in our industries, in agriculture. We can reuse it much more than we do today. I think in California, reuse rates run somewhere between 8 to 13%. That is, pardon me for saying it, pathetically low. When you compare it to Israel, which is in a desert, recycling, I don't know what, but maybe 60 or more percent of their water.
Wow.
That's how they survive in a desert and thrive.
Wow.
And California can survive and thrive. My concern for California is agriculture. I mean, that's what uses 80% of the water. That's what's really at risk here. I worry not only about California's agriculture, but many of the other areas of the world that serve as, our humanity's breadbaskets.
Right.
They're all the major breadbaskets are coming under pressure. We see bouts of drought. We see declining groundwater levels because people are pumping more out of the ground than is being replenished. And so the issue of food security is great. And I think we're going to see a lot more of the types of protests we saw in the Middle East in 2008 and 2011, where poor people who are spending upwards of 50 or 60% of their take-home income on food, what we're looking at here is food prices increasing and those people not being able to feed themselves. That's what keeps me up at night.
Wow. In terms of what you're saying, it's a fascinating frame of theses you just put up in terms of tying back our water crisis with food scarcity.
Yes.
Which is real, as we know here in California, which we are one of the great providers of the food for the United States and around the world.
Absolutely.
And as you say, there's other great food baskets around the world that are under that kind of pressure. Given what you know, though, about the water technologies that exist, like you point out, Israel is deploying this in a great way.
Yep.
Singapore is deploying it in a very successful way as well. Mm-hmm. Do you feel hopeful that the food scarcity crisis won't pass a horrible tipping point if we get with it now and deploy this technology faster rather than slower? Or what is pushing back on the better question, Charlie, is what's pushing back on the appropriate deployment of this very doable and usable technology that already exists?
Yeah. Well, there are ways to use water more efficiently in agriculture.
Right.
And let me explain why agriculture is so important. Agriculture accounts for 80% of our water use, and it's true in developing countries. It's true in most developed countries. It's true here in America. Of the water that is used and then lost to the system until the next rainfall, 80% of that is for agriculture. And see, here's the problem, John. They're telling us we need to increase our agricultural production by 70% in the next 35 years to accommodate both a growing global population, so we're going to move from 7 to 9 billion, and to accommodate a population that is eating more meat-intensive diets. Those two drivers are requiring us to increase our food production. On the other hand, the resources available for food, water and land, are maxed out.
Wow.
And we are going into our groundwater. It's like going into your savings account and, you know, just spending your savings,
Which is already overdrawn.
with abandon.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And that's my real concern. You know, can we somehow rethink our food, our agriculture and food policies to accommodate this big pressure? Can we avoid greater wastage and loss of food? You know, about 30% of the food we produce, or maybe 25 or 30%, is lost or wasted. And that represents, you know, about 20% of the water we use worldwide. If we could cut that down to zero, I mean, we would make great strides towards improving both our water security and our food security.
That's fascinating. Well, I'm going to leave you for any last words before we sign off today, because I know we both have to get back to the bigger conference, but I'd like to leave you with any final thoughts on what you're doing at the World Resources and what we're doing here today at this wonderful Wharton GE event.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, this is a global problem that requires a lot of people coming to understand what the issues are. You know, looking at the information, changing attitudes towards our resources. So, you know, what I hope to do through Aqueduct, we do through this conference, is to further increase people's knowledge out there so they can use this knowledge to participate in this effort.
Well, Charlie, you're always welcome back on Green is Good to further
Thanks,
the
John.
message of what you're doing and at the World Resources Institute, and to further the message of the limited natural resources we have in this world and how we can come up with solutions that can put us in a better place. We really thank you for your time today. For our listeners and viewers out there, to learn more about what Charlie Iceland and his colleagues are doing at the World Resources Institute, please go to www.wri.org. Again, this is John Shigarian and Charlie Iceland from the Wharton IGEL GE Innovation Technology Water Resource Conference in beautiful downtown San Francisco. Charlie Iceland, you are truly living proof that green is good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. Pleasure.